Hey everyone, welcome to Mobile DevOps is a Thing, a podcast by Bitrise featuring mobile developers from all around the world. Today, we're going to talk about all things related to app security, DevSecOps, and about how to build mobile apps safely and make sure that users' rights and personal data are always protected. I'm Noura Bazy, and I'm here today with Kevin Toms, our developer advocate. Hey Kevin.
Hi there.
How are you?
Good, thanks.
And our special guest today is security expert Anastasiia Voitova. Hey Anastasiia, how are you today?
Hi. Awesome. Let's talk about security.
Thank you so much for coming to this podcast. I think this is going to be a really important episode for anyone involved in mobile development because app security is something that shouldn't be overlooked. So let's get started. You have over 10 years of experience in software development. You're famous in the cybersecurity space, giving conference talks and building security software. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. I have this, typical computer science background. I have master's degree, and yeah, I was a developer. Well, I am software developer for really a lot, like many years. And I started as a mobile app developer, just randomly, just because when I was like finishing my university, my friends asked me to join their company to build mobile apps, and I was like, okay, what language do you use? And they told me Objective-C, and I was like, what is that? Because it was many years ago. It was on like iOS 3 or iOS 4, and literally no one know an Objective-C. So people were just coming to write Objective-C code from any other languages. And in my first job interview, they were asking me questions about Java, just because Java was more popular, obviously, than Objective-C. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's talk about Java. But I will write code using Objective-C. So years passed, and I started as mobile app developer. I made many applications because I was working in a boutique company. So some of the software we made for others, some products were our own. So we had to experience all these shiny bits and pieces like marketing of our applications. And at some point when I continue to create backends, continue to write server-side logic, on some point I realized that, mobile applications themselves is only a part of a puzzle. Yeah, kind of important, nice, new and shiny, but still it's kind of only one entry point, one front end, let's put it this way. And to provide better user experience, to take care about like privacy and security and things like that, we need to understand and control the whole system, all the applications, all the front ends, all the back ends, different, proxies, caches, yada. And then I got interested into, stopping doing only mobile parts and continue doing all the things with accent in security itself. So I just say that I'm security software engineer, right? And many people in security, they might have different experience because they might come from different areas. But my specialty is creating secure software and protecting data that this software operates. So that's application security and data security.
Awesome, thank you. So I read something really interesting in an interview with you, that you were a mobile developer initially, and at some point you realized that you had too much control over your users' data. So you had access to databases, you could see real names and email addresses. So you could have tracked real people if you wanted to, which is really scary if you think about it. At that point, you understood that these apps are not as secure as they should be. Basically, that's how your attention started shifting from mobile development to becoming more involved in app security. Can you tell us a bit more about this journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is funny because right now, when I work in data security company, right, we create this like tools and software for data protection, for encryption, and other developers use the software. So right now I still experience like the same pattern, the same behavior when other developers come to me and say, hey, Anastasiia, we're working in this company, and this company is kind of nice and we really like it, but we see all our customers' data and we have access to all the databases, and this is wrong. And like, Anastasiia, can you help us somehow? Because we feel this is wrong, but we don't know what to do. So yeah, I kind of, I see this pattern happening still many years after when I had to experience it. I see still developers experience it, and that's fine because it's just step. I would say that this is a step in any software company culture. When first they create some software, they try to get on market, they work on features, they work on user acquisition, and then when they like stabilize their development, when they obtain more maturity, they start thinking about other things, not just features, but privacy, security, performance, maintainability, reliability, yada yada. And this might be like a good step to see what is happening, what controls and accesses developers have, and how to kind of fix it. At the same time, right now, I work with companies who think about security from day zero, and some products, some software is being created with the idea of this, zero trust, zero knowledge. As a company, when I create software, I don't want to have any access to any data because it's too much trouble, because all this data should be protected, because all this data is regulated, yada yada. So for me as a company, it's better when I don't have any access at all. And with this kind of thinking, with these models in head, some developers come to me saying, hey, we want to build the software. We haven't started yet. We want to build it, and we want to integrate security from the beginning to make sure that everything is encrypted and encrypted, that we don't have any access to any kind of data.
So zero knowledge or zero trust systems, which are kind of new concepts, they are part of an initiative to prevent data breaches, right? And they do so essentially by eliminating the trust from the organization's network based on this principle of trust nothing, always verify first, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, in a sense, yeah. Zero knowledge is a brand new term, zero trust is a brand new term. And if you can find the NIST guidelines about zero trust architecture, and the guideline explains the idea that when we are a large company, we have a huge infrastructure and all these, services and microservices in our infrastructure, they don't trust each other, right? So think about that. First, previously, you had an idea about extranet, like public API, and intranet, like trusted and protected zone. Something behind the fence, some like attackers, some public things, and inside the fence, inside your perimeter. And the previous idea was that you can trust data and processes and services and software inside your perimeter. Unfortunately, the history shows that many attacks can happen from inside, first of all, then that many attacks cannot be noticed, and the idea of trusting even our own software inside our network is, well, too optimistic. So zero trust approach says us that no, we should not trust software inside our infrastructure more than we trust software outside of our infrastructure. We should authenticate even our own services. We should use TLS even inside our infrastructures. We should make sure that all the data is encrypted as much as we can encrypt it, that all the passwords are protected. So zero trust means that we don't trust the software inside our infrastructures. And the guideline, NIST guideline, it explained the system from authentication perspective, right? Trust in terms of like connection trust. Do we trust the things we connect to? Zero knowledge is a little bit different. And the idea of zero knowledge architecture, it's more like a data-oriented approach, right? The first one, zero trust, is more like authentication-oriented approach, and zero knowledge is a data-oriented approach. So in our system operates data. It has zero knowledge about it, right? So system doesn't know the nature of data. All data is encrypted. So we cannot put some service and the service will see the plain text data. No, it won't. Only certain points, only certain, services can see certain amount of data they really need. But all other data is encrypted and system has no idea what is happening. Technically saying zero knowledge architecture, it's not, the term is also kind of new and you can find different names. It's also called no knowledge architecture. It also can be called with using the term zero knowledge proofs, which is a little bit different. Zero knowledge proofs is a cryptographic term that explains a set of frameworks. So there are different names for different aspects of building secure software. Zero trust. We don't trust even our own services, and we authenticate connections inside our network as we authenticate connections outside our network. Zero knowledge. Our system has no idea on the data it operates. The less it knows about the data, the better. And things like zero knowledge proofs are cryptographic protocols that allow basically to some of these things happen, and zero knowledge proofs are used in different blockchain networks really a lot.
Oh, wow. Thanks. That's a great explanation. And it sounds like a great starting point. So building apps securely and avoiding potential attacks a really complex area with a lot of different things to consider. So let's start from the basics. Let's say that there's a team of developers who've never had to worry about security aspects of development before. What would be the first thing they would need to implement or take care of as a basis of building secure apps?
Okay, I really like this question because we've seen a lot of this, like of the mobile teams, working on something and asking if they need to spend time on security or continue working on features and releases and playing with Swift UI and things like that. So many shiny bits there. So how I like to explain this is talking about building a home. Like, let's pretend that we are building a house, okay? We are building a house somewhere in a nice place. And obviously, this is our house, and we want it to be secure and private. So there are sort of things that we can do. We assess where we build this house. For example, if we build a house in a not very nice neighborhood with high crime rates, we kind of understand that we need to put more efforts and money into protection measures, into insurance, and maybe even hire some security company if we plan to store any good values, any values in our house. If let's imagine that we are building a house in a nice neighborhood, obviously we won't think about spending so much efforts on security. Next, let's imagine that we're building this house somewhere close to the forest in the area that has known for forest fires, right? We want to make sure that we build these defenses, that we build some protection, that we build some fences around the house, that we put water sprinkles. And all these things, we can understand that we need to do them just by thinking, just by assessing risks. So the first step in software development, in thinking about security, is risk assessment. What is our application? Does it handle sensitive data? Yes, no. Is it data regulated? Because if the data is regulated, the regulations basically tell us what we need to do. Even without overthinking it, even without being paranoid, there are certain regulations, so we need to do certain things. Next, do we assume that we work on application that will be hacked a lot. For example, if you're building a really nice service and the service has public API, abusing this API may be one of the risks. Imagine that you have like millions of users and some part of these users are abusing your API. So your servers make more like requests, respond on more requests from these abusers, from these malicious users, and you spend more money on handling all this server-side load, right? So abusing API means you need to take care of that. You need to build in some API protection measures, some filtering, limiting, throttling, anti-fraud systems, yada, yada. Or forget about API. Let's say that you put some data, your IP, inside your app, and you don't really want to have this IP leaked. Then, of course, you forget about the API and you move into building, into encrypting this API, this IP, this file that you have in your app. It can be anything from some database, from some dictionary that you have in the app, to ML models that are that they're not sensitive by its nature, but it's part of your business. So you kind of want to have them protected, right? So risk assessment is a step number one, to understand what bad can happen, what are potential threats and risks, and what defenses you can build against these risks to mitigate these risks, to minimize the chance of risks happening. Obviously, there are some certain risk assessment, risk management frameworks. And in security, I would say that security risk management doesn't actually differ a lot from typical business risk management, right? When you, as a company owner or as a CEO, you assess, you manage the risks, what your company needs to do, where you can lose money. So from security perspective, the risks themselves are a little bit different because you think about attacks, you don't think about fines, you don't think about, reputational risks because your SMM manager writes something weird in Twitter, right? In security, you think about, yeah, okay, we can write in Twitter that our application is super secure and attract a lot of attention, and then we will need to handle this attention, right? So step number one is risk management, understanding risks, threats, understanding defense measures. Step number two is obviously understanding regulations, understanding typical best practices and guidelines specified to this platform. We know all these typical problems with iOS applications. We know typical problems with Android applications, with web applications. If you don't know them, go to read OWASP, because OWASP has a lot of different guidelines. For example, OWASP top 10 is a top 10 risks, problems, mistakes, issues with certain platform. Mobile top 10 explains about typical mistakes with mobile apps. Web top 10 explains typical mistakes with web app. Top 10 is a very short document, literally just 10 points, top 10 typical things. And this is a good starting point to read and understand if you have something similar in your app, if you should work on it. Next, we can go deeper. And when company grows, when company obtains some maturity, non-functional requirements become more important than functional requirements, right? Functional requirements is how the system works. Do users get features we want them to have, right? Functionality. Non-functional requirements are all these maintainability, reliability, security, scalability, performance. So are the attributes of our system that helps us to build it faster, to deliver things faster. And with growing maturity of our company, usually developers spend more time on these non-functional requirements. And security is one of them. To understand where our product, our company is right now in this maturity model, we can again go to OWASP and read OWASP SAMM, OWASP SAM. SAM is Software Assurance Maturity Model. Basically, this is a checklist of things from organizational perspective, from like processes perspective, and obviously technical, like code, delivery, testing, a lot of like huge checklists in different areas to make sure to measure the maturity level. When we measured it once, we can plan and prioritize features to improve it and to track our progress.
I just want to touch a little bit on motivation, because you were talking about companies not doing security and talking about the steps where they do security. I mean, it strikes me that it's similar to businesses that start up and they're just thinking about making money, and then suddenly they realize they have to comply with tax rules and regulations. Do you find that it's things like GDPR that trigger people to start looking at the security of their data when they realize they've got to comply? Has that changed things, or are mobile development companies still immature, basically, generally? What's your experience?
Well, I'm very practical. I believe the money is business motivator number one, right? So as a business people, if we have some ways to obtain more money, we go there. And at the same time, if we see some regulations that can lead to financial losses, to fines, to those reputational risks that we need again to pay to our legal team and yada yada. So if we have something that pushes us to do something, or we will lose money, obviously, like many companies do this. Many companies think about regulations just because it's a risk of losing money. Yeah, I've seen many companies that start caring about security because of GDPR. At the same thing, I see many companies that don't care about security even when we have GDPR. So it's like, every company is a little bit like, every company is unique, and they believe that they found some business model to gather money, right? And sometimes security is part of their business model, sometimes it's not. And we see different examples. We see how large companies fail. We know a lot of these stories and issues with Facebook, with like Google privacy issues, with huge leaks like LinkedIn leak, Capital One leak, but companies are still there. Remember these scandals about Zoom, for example, a year ago, when everyone was super concerned about Zoom security. Fortunately for Zoom, at that time, the Zoom was large enough, and they have enough money to be able to buy a security company and work on improving security, right? Not everyone is so lucky.
Mm-hmm.
So many companies just die on this step when suddenly they realize that they didn't invest enough, and now they need to pay a lot of money for these fines, and they just don't have this money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you, so some of that is, it strikes me that there is security and invisible lack of security, that many companies, they're insecure, for example, exposing data, and they're completely blind to what they're doing is one of the problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen different researchers about how many days it takes for a company to understand that they're being hacked, right? Or some incident happened. So different researchers say different number, but every time this number is huge. It's more than half a year. Typically it takes for a company to realize that it was hacked, something is wrong. Yeah, many companies don't spend time on security, and they don't have security even on the horizon. It just doesn't exist in their business model, in their company development. Sometimes they can suddenly find out that it's very important. And I'm working with some of customers of this type. They are in a rush. For example, they wanted to sell their company, but during due diligence, it appeared that they don't have, their processes is not mature, and security just, again, it's part of the process. It's not the value itself, it's part of the maturity. So their process is not mature, and the companies that wanted to buy them don't want to buy a company without, that doesn't have enough of this maturity. So they want to improve security really fast for all the money in the world, which of course quite complicated.
That's an interesting point you're saying there, because there you're saying that they haven't done the security and they're doing it late in the day, trying to retrofit it. It strikes me that security is a little bit like, has an analogy to bugs. It's always better to find a bug early, very early, which is why people have things like continuous integration in order to catch things early, automated testing to catch things early. The later you catch a bug, it's an exponential time effort involved in fixing it. I would think that the same applies to security. If you do your due diligence and follow good practices early with the development of your application, you will find it cheaper to add the security elements in than to try and add it, like you said, in a late case just before you're being purchased.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the same analogy. And there is an idea, a framework called SSDLC, which is Secure Software Development Lifecycle, which basically says what you just said. If we put security on every step of creating software, starting with design, we put some security on the phase of designing software, like design, I mean like system design, right? Yeah. We put then implementation, like secure coding, we use correct libraries, we use static code analyzers, we take care of our code. Then on the testing, we make sure that our application is tested from security perspective, and obviously on the delivery, like continuous integration, continuous delivery step. If we put security on all these steps, we spend less money than if we do nothing and suddenly, sometime in the future, we need to implement all the security in the world in a very, very short period. However, the problem here, the drama, is that every case, every business is unique, every product is unique, right? And we see totally different stories. We see success stories from companies that neglected security completely, but they achieved some success, and now they need to take care about security. At the same time, we've seen stories about companies that put a lot of effort into security and didn't succeed at all, right? So security itself is just one of the things, one of the options. It's not like something that can define along the future of the company. And this is what makes it complicated. And this is what makes it so complicated to sell to managers, because managers will say, sorry, features, I understand features. I can understand performance, but security, that's invisible. We spend time on it. We don't see any impact. It never ends, because every month you come to me saying, hey, we need to do this and fix this. So it never ends. How to understand that we are spending this money for a good cause? This what makes it so complicated. All the different use cases, all the possibilities.
Yeah, and one of the aspects is, say you're developing a mobile app. So you're thinking about security of your mobile app, but the mobile app doesn't stand alone. So it connects, and you need to think about everything the mobile app does and what it talks to. I mean, this is one thing you mentioned earlier, but for example, if it uses an API.
Yeah, and sometimes a mobile app can be like an entry point. You can control cars with a mobile app, right? And again, we've seen the stories how cars were hacked using mobile app, because mobile app were hacked, because API were hacked. And right now, if you think about it, everything has a mobile app. You can have a mobile app to shop like everywhere. You can have a mobile app for your hotel, for your apartment complex. Like, I know people that they're living in this modern apartment complex where everything is closed. And as a person who lives there, you have a mobile app registered to your name and linked to your flat, and you can just open the gates using your phone, right? So mobile app is just a part of the puzzle. And again, this is a drama, because sometimes I see teams where mobile developers put a lot of effort into securing their app, but the API, the backend, like the web part of applications are not secure enough. So yeah, mobile app is secure, but everything else is not so secure. And obviously the weakest link rule, right, applied here. Or sometimes I see companies where the company itself, all their software, all their mature infrastructure is secure, but mobile app is being developed by another company, by different people, and it's insecure. And it's a perfect entry point to break as much as we can, to break like everything.
Yeah, and people can pretend to be the mobile app too, can't they? And be talking to the API from another application if you don't secure it correctly. Are there tools that mobile developers can use that would, as for example, in their CI process, that will enhance their security?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, like mobile applications are technically the same applications. So the approach is similar between mobile and web, right? Yeah, mobile apps have certain limitations and features different for iOS as a platform, Android as a platform, things like React Native or Xamarin, right? They have their like features itself because every platform is unique, but the frameworks, the ideas are similar. So what exact tools we can use? First of all is, of course, code scanning, static code analysis, for example, tools that just analyze the code, trying to find typical bugs, trying to find code patterns that are typical for certain vulnerabilities. These static code analyzers are very nice as an addition to the process because, robots should work and people should spend their time on creating code. What is good that static code analyzers can find pieces that are very easy to overlook during code review. And good static code analyzers are being constantly updated with all these, security vulnerabilities databases, so they can point on security issues that are very new, that on security vulnerabilities that are very new. They just arrived. I really recommend, there are different kind of static code analyzers. You can find open source and free. You can find tools that are paid like Snyk, White Source Software, SonarQube, Veracode, yada, yada. Of course, every language is unique. So take a look, like pay attention on what languages they support. Because again, Objective-C is weird. Swift is more popular, obviously, but Objective-C is a weird beast. So it might be complicated if your code is written in Objective-C to find the proper static code analyzer. Then we analyzed our code. Wonderful. Everyone is talking about dependencies, right? About all the libraries, insecure libraries, and that we need to update these libraries as fast as possible. The drama here is supply chain attacks. That one library, like broken, insecure library, basically can break the whole application. So what do? We add tools that scan our dependencies and say that, okay, this dependency has updates, let's update it. More intelligent tools can even scan your code base to see if you actually call the method that is vulnerable from this library, right? But of course, the more intelligent it is, the more likely you can see false positives or like false negatives. Again, with dependency analyzers, again, there are certain free and open source, and there are certain like paid tools like White Source Software again. In many languages, these tools are kind of built in, like npm audit for Node, for JavaScript. We also have Python something. Also GitHub. If you use GitHub can alert using their like Dependabot can alert about libraries for many popular languages. But it's a nice step to add into CI/CD process. What else is out there? Different kind of testing, right? Obviously, I'm a big fan of testing because, again, robots should do hard work. People should like create software. From my experience, most tests are fine, and most tests, if they're updated, they're good to have. I'm not a big fan of UI tests, but luckily when I work with security, I don't work with UI tests at all. So unit tests, integration tests. My favorite are when we test application and backend, like the whole, like integration test suite. We send some requests from the application side. We process those requests on backend side and send some response. So integration tests are great. Another thing that mobile developers don't do a lot is fuzzing. I'm not sure that they should do, but if you create if some part of your application is sensitive and it works with sensitive data, you can add fuzzing, which is automated testing where the fuzzer, the software, tries to break your code functions by changing inputs. For example, you have a function that gets 2 integer as input parameters, right? And the fuzzing software will try to send different examples of integers, valid, and maybe weird cases like null, nil, integer max, integer min, to see how your software will react. Fuzzing is based, it has a lot of random in it, so fuzzing tests usually they take time and they're not predictable, right? So if you run the same tests, the same fuzzing test multiple times, you can get multiple results, because on some point the fuzzing software can finally find an edge case by enumerating different random possibilities, So I really like using fuzzing, but these tests are long, they take time, and sometimes it's better to run them at night when no one is actually sitting there and waiting what will happen.
It's an interesting sequence I just want to draw out there from the things you've said. One is a mobile development company that is not looking at security. So that's a start point. They're vulnerable. Then they add in security practices. They perhaps look at the top 10s and start to do those. But once you add in things like you said in the CI system, like static code analysis, you're getting something else there, because you've done your own part of adding in security yourself. With the static code stuff, you've got third parties looking after keeping it up to date. And that's definitely like another level of value, because you're not going to constantly maintain, or maybe you should, but you may not maintain your own security developments, as well as a third party that's looking at all of the vulnerabilities, including dependencies. And you just can't do that. That's really valuable to increase the security, and it happens automatically. That's definitely attractive, I think. And then adding in testing and, as you say, things like fuzzing as well, you finally start to get a bit more robust. So it's a sequence, really.
Yeah, that's a sequence. And also you can add the secrets detection, because sometimes developers just push API keys or like emails and passwords into Git. Some secrets can be hidden in code itself, others can be put into preference files, playlists, environment files. It's very nice to have some tools that are watching you, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is one of the steps. However, the drama here that every time when we add any tool to our pipeline, we increase the attack surface. Because every tool, even when it helps us to improve security of our app, can be insecure and malicious itself.
But then you've got to source them correctly, haven't you? Isn't that what that is? Make sure that you do your best to get the right tools rather than a sort of a new open source tool that not many people are using yet is probably risky.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're into, a rabbit hole that we use tools to improve security, and who will watch our tools that we use to improve security. But this is a typical approach. You set up a pipeline with different tools that helps you to improve security in your app, and you kind of outsource some of security jobs to tools, and everyone is happy. Another part of drama here is that these tools, they require, how I say, babysitting, because no one likes false positives. No one likes when they create a pull request and suddenly a tool says, automated tool. Obviously, it's not very intelligent. It's just a piece of code, right? So automated tool says that, hey, you have key in your source code. And you're like, I don't have. And you open your source code and you realize it's just a name of some methods, like encrypt key.
Okay.
Right. And this is a false positive because I don't have mistake here, but everything is fine. But the tool, it's just triggered by using the word key in your code. And false positives can really ruin all the experience, because when you just introduce the tool, developers see that, okay, something is happening, and they see this red builds, and they go and they check and they see false positive. Well, that is bad, let's ignore it. Next time when that happens, if they see false positive again, day after day, they alert. They don't react anymore on this alert, and they're like, oh yeah, maybe this is false positive. Oh yeah, this tool is buggy. So these tools require babysitting, and they require correct triage procedures. Because sometimes we need to ignore some results. Sometimes we need to be able to say, yeah, this library is vulnerable, but we will continue using it until, the end of the sprint or the end of the quarter. We accept the risks, because updating this library might cost us more time and money than using, even it's vulnerable, for the next 2 weeks, So while tools can significantly improve the code and experience, at the same time they add this operation burden on our team.
But I would also, I can see that point, certainly. I can also see that not having any could create some interesting things. For example, in your code, you've got the URL of a staging server or something like that, and you're not using it now because you're going live, but you still got the URL in there, which gives people access to unsecured information. So, but you would notice it, but you just release it. But maybe an automated tool that's checking what's going on is going to highlight this unsecured information that you're releasing in your app.
Yeah, that's a good scenario. And all the staging, dev, debug symbols should not be a part of production app pipeline. And automated tools are the best, best mechanism to make sure that production environment is different from stage and dev. And
on another subject, you look after a cryptographic library. How do you find looking after that? That must be at times difficult to maintain.
Yeah, well, fortunately, I work in a company that creates cryptographic stuff. So it's easier for me because I can talk with people who have much more experience in cryptography than I have. And yeah, but maintaining any open source thing is really complicated, even if it's not as popular as, because cryptographic libraries are not the most popular piece of software, trust me. And I'm kind of happy when I'm maintaining, because I'm happy that it's not the most popular software in the world, because I see how different projects, especially super popular projects, how much loads and requests from developers they get. I try to automate everything that can be automated. I really use a lot of CI/CD, software. Let's put it this way, because Themis as a library is a cryptographic library which has the idea that it's very easy to use for people who don't know cryptography at all, right? For developers who just want to secure the data or send something encrypted to other application. And Themis kind of works as a single API across many platforms, which solves a typical issue that developers have when they create multi-platform applications, because every language have some cryptographic library. Some of them are modern and nice, like CryptoKit in Swift. It's a modern and nice library. Or Go crypto library in Go. It's also modern and nice. Unfortunately, other languages still have kind of old cryptographic libraries, and APIs are very different. So there is no single standard how to write cryptographic library. So all the APIs of all the libraries in the world, they are different and they're not compatible. So developers can spend really a lot of time trying to befriend cryptographic libraries from different platforms, when all they want to do is just encrypt the data and send this data encrypted and be sure that they will decrypt it on the other side. And this is the problem that Themis solves, because it has single API across 14 different platforms and languages. So I try to automate as much as possible, because obviously I don't want to go and fix all the things when yet another something is being updated on one of these 14 platforms. And I use a lot of services to help me with that. For example, for mobile part of Themis, I use Bitrise a lot to run all the tests for iOS simulators, for example, for macOS, because we support macOS as well. And developers can install Themis using Cocoa Pods, using CarTouch, using Swiss Package Manager. And that's a hell, because the library is the same, but with all these different installation ways. I don't want to spend my own time to try all the options out there. Yeah, for luckily we have Bitrise for that. We also use a lot of GitHub Actions for other pieces of infrastructure, for other languages, and we run a lot of tests on every pull request, just to make sure that any change, doesn't break existing things.
So in the past few years, there were more and more privacy regulations introduced into software development as well. And it seems like there's still a large contrast. On one hand, we have these sophisticated teams, let's say, who have really advanced DevSecOps processes, take security seriously, which means that they integrate security checks from the very beginning of the app development. And this might be more true in industries that are more affected, like finance and banking or healthcare. But on the other hand, you still often see a lack of awareness and interest. And some developers still see security as the necessary evil. How do you see this shifting, and what do you see in terms of the future of app security?
I like when developers see security as a necessary evil, because there is the word necessary. Because sometimes developers just see security as the evil, just something scary that just don't want to do like at all. So from my perspective, again, everyone is different, and then like every company is different. I'm totally fine with those that don't use any security and don't put any security efforts. I just try to avoid using their software. That's all I can say. And for example, in my company, we have this assessment when we introduce new software on a company level. Before doing that, we assess it from security perspective. And of course, it's quite complicated because we're security engineers, so we know things where to look. And oh yes, it happened. We really did find different things and avoid using certain software just because it's not the developers don't implement even like the simplest security measures. So I'm very open to different approaches. It just, personally and on a company level, if people don't put their efforts into security, probably that's not the software we will use. I would say that different organizations have different maturity level, and it's great where developers just at least have this awareness level because it's better than nothing. Right? And it's very easy to achieve. I mentioned already OWASP Top 10. It's awareness document. That's a document that it's not deeply technical. It just explains that these are typical issues and this is how to prevent them. It's very easy to do. Next step would be like looking on OWASP cheat sheets, because now OWASP has a lot of cheat sheets for different technologies, how to use JWT tokens correctly. Again, doing that, reading this checklist, cheat sheet won't make any application 100% secure, but it will help to improve, to fix some small area. Right? Next time you read another cheat sheet, you improve another area. Step by step, works great. Also, OWASP has these large checklists for mobile, for example, MSVS, which is Mobile Application Security Verification Standards. Again, there's a checklist. And this checklist is super useful for developers that are past of awareness level, that want to go deeper, because this checklist has different tests, like acceptance tests, different requirements. The developers can read and think, do we have this in our code? Yeah, if we do have, should we fix it? How to fix it? Like plan and prioritize. I believe the most dangerous scenario is the illusion of security, where people believe that they're spending some efforts and they have some security in place, but they don't use any of these, publicly available guidelines. They don't measure like themselves into something which is considered the best practices, So they think that they do things, but they might go into totally different direction.
You mentioned about OWASP there as a source of guidelines. It's interesting to me that what you think Apple and Google are there. They're the platforms for mobile. Apple make a great play about how secure their system is. What about the developer guidelines that come from Apple and Google? Are they providing guidelines that you think people should be looking at and following as well for security?
Yeah, obviously. Well, both Apple and Google, they do have guidelines. It's just, different from all other guidelines. For example, Apple, they have this Apple platform security. They had iOS security guidelines and macOS security guidelines, but they merged into platform security, if I remember correctly. And also previously they had this secure coding documentation where they explain a lot of things. But right now, I think this one is outdated and it was not updated a lot. So all we have is this platform security guidelines. And Apple also had this
Review process, yeah.
Yeah, review process and review guidelines where they, enumerate things we should not do and things we should do, but they don't actually put any like technical vision, like technical approaches there. And also, I really like to see how Apple is changing their review process. Partially, I believe they do it because of GDPR. Because if you think about that, yeah, GDPR appeared, CCPA appeared, and suddenly we have these changes in app review process. And we need, as a developers, we need to put these privacy forms. What data our application collects, how this data is being used, yada, yada, right? So for me, all this looks as a part of the same process where there are regulations that push large vendors like Apple, like Google, like Amazon. These vendors, they're not responsible for security of our systems, of our applications, right? So they find out a way to push developers, to push companies to do, follow these regulations.
To hand it on. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Push from outside. You must do the things.
Yeah. So you don't think you think it's useful, and in some cases it helps compliance, but it's not adding as much as, say, looking at OWASP information and guidelines, which is more specific.
OWASP guidelines are more specific, and they're community built guidelines. Everyone can put something, everyone can contribute, and this is like a community wisdom, industry wisdom, if we put it this way. Apple guidelines or like Google Android security guidelines, they're great, they are must read for people who work on these platforms, but they are not enough.
So if by listening to this, mobile development company has become aware we must look at security, and they're a bit intimidated, saying there's so much we need to know and do, what would you see as the small effort, high reward things that they should start with?
I think the good idea would be to allocate some time, 10%, 5%, let's say every other Friday or every other Wednesday. So one day every 2 weeks to look on security stories, to read about security, to plan some features, some security features, to implement some security features, right? Because low effort would be not doing everything at the same time, but at least doing some small things periodically on schedule, right? And I know companies that have security sprints. So developers just do features during regular sprints, but then they have this allocated week or 2 weeks when they do only security stories, when they read about security, and this is allocated time, so they don't need to think about features and they don't need to think about releases. They can focus entirely on their research, on implementing something, on planning new things. And from my experience, it works really well when you just have this allocated time, even small amount of time, even one day every 2 weeks. It works much better than if you don't have any time and you're in this constant struggle. We need to do something, but where to start?
Yeah. The pressure of features need to be released, so we've no time. Another element of this I was thinking of was you can do all your research and say follow all the security guidelines, but you need to stay up to date. So you need to have some kind of news service that's telling you what's happening new in terms of security. When you say you need to be connected to something that's doing that.
Yeah, let's read my Twitter, for example. I mean,
it's a good example. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. But the thing is, with security news, a lot of things are scary and paranoid, because security communities, they're very bugs oriented, attacks oriented, the world is on fire oriented. And if as a developers, if you read all this news all the time, you might stop valuing things so much. Because why we should take care about security if everyone is doomed, right? Why we should take care about security if new bugs are being introduced basically like every week? Okay, so I would recommend, of course, follow security like news, but it's better to understand that no system is 100% secure and there is no end in implementing security. Literally, there is no stage as something is secure. It's a constant process. So news can be a source of ideas, of things to try, but not, not a mind thinking framework itself. These are just news. They happen, yeah.
So just going back a little bit to this low effort, high reward topic that we discussed, I was wondering if there's something like, let's say, low effort, high risk, or let's just call it like this. For example, a phishing attack can cost $1 million, but they still happen every single day, even though they are relatively easy to prevent by checking properly whether an email seems legitimate, informing the security team about it, or having internal trainings that prepare employees for these kinds of attacks. But they still exist. Can you think of some other examples that are like easily avoidable, but they have the potential to cause $1 million loss to the company?
When we're talking about mobile app development, there are a lot of low-hanging fruits. For example, don't put sensitive data into plist, into NS user defaults, into property files, into like basically any files except for keychain and like secure enclave and Android keystore, right? This is super easy. This is like step number 0, but still we see a lot of applications that put sensitive data into these files. Then make sure that your production application doesn't have any dev, test, staging URLs, any like emails, password, keys, nothing that is not production. Okay, again, super easy to do. It's just making sure that the application doesn't have any, tests. Tests are not part of production app. Because sometimes, especially with iOS application, when they have many schemes, project schemes in the Xcode, some files can be added to different schemes, and suddenly you build an app, and there are like some tests or some. I usually find some JSONs with the user accounts, for example, or something like that, obviously for debug purposes. Right. Very, very, very easy to do. These things are super easy to do. Then again, just open OWASP top 10. Some things there are easy. Open MSVS. Some of the requirements are super easy. For example, make sure that every time when user need to enter their password, you use password text field. The secure text entry, right? Very easy. I mean, but still we have some applications that allow insecure entry. In OWASP MSVS, there is a requirement that might sound a little bit weird. It says to disable keyboard cache and to disable third-party keyboards on sensitive fields. Basically, what it means that sometimes users use third-party keyboards, not system keyboards, and third-party keyboards have access to all the inputs, to all the text that has been written, right? So if user puts their credit card number or their password or their PIN code using this third-party keyboard, technically saying this keyboard can gather this information and send to its backend for some malicious purposes. So make sure just to disable third-party keyboards on the fields that are sensitive. Again, very easy to do. It's like all you need to do is just scan your code base, find these fields, and like implement a couple of methods. to disable keyboards. Disabling screenshots, I mean system snapshots. Like on iOS, this application carousel, when you can see the application like screenshot. On Android, it's kind of the same. And on this on the screens, when user enter their sensitive information, again, passwords, credit cards, basically any screen with some nice and shiny and attractive information, you don't want to make a screenshot from that. And on iOS, all you need to do is to on these view controllers to add this view will appear, view will disappear, load, unload things, and put some window, like widescreen or like blur, nice and shiny blur image to prevent operating system from snapshotting, like screenshotting these areas. All these are less than an hour, less than half an hour of actual work. Of course, with tests and other things, maybe a little bit more, but still. But it will improve application. All these small steps will improve application. Yeah.
And what are your primary sources of knowledge when it comes to learning about application security? Is there anything you haven't mentioned so far that you would recommend to the listeners?
Well, there are certain books, mobile app security, like iOS. I'll find the books. I will send links.
Yeah, and we can put them in the show notes.
Yeah, so there are certain books about mobile app security, like about iOS security internals, Android security internals, but every book, of course, especially on systems as fast in development and updating as iOS and Android, every book gets outdated quite fast. So OWASP is our number one of these practical guidelines. And then, of course, as mobile applications are just applications. So all the security engineering guidelines applied here, and NIST. I really like NIST guidelines, which sometimes are huge and boring, but still they are a foundation for OWASP guidelines, right? So when you're reading OWASP guidelines, often you just read a simplified explanation of more complicated and more like large NIST guidelines. And in NIST, you can find basically any answer on like any question. What are security controls? How to build security controls into your application? What are the different types of security controls? How to do risk management? What's like procedures? What things you should do only once? What things you should continue doing once in a while? If you're using cryptography, how to build key management, how to make sure that your system is nice. All these things that, from my understanding, are written for large governmental military organizations with thousands of people. They can be applied even for small mobile applications with 2 developers working on them. Just scale them, right? Then there are many things written about security engineering, like basically a book from Ross Anderson called Security Engineering. It has nothing to do with mobile app development. It has nothing to do with app development at all. It just explains how security works in real life. For example, what are biometrics? What are different, things that are part of biometrics procedures? How we can authenticate person based on their biometrics, like credentials. This way, what are pros and cons of this system? What is like security engineering? I have a book somewhere there. So security engineering is a huge book that just explains how security works in real life. And of course, all these ideas and frameworks are basically the same in development.
All right, thanks. I will find these and we'll list them in the show notes. And I think we're reaching the time limit, but I have some other questions. You're also the community leader of Women Who Code in Ukraine and a woman in the cybersecurity space. And I was wondering how this experience is for you.
Well, I really, I am part of our local Women Who Code Kyiv community for many years, and now 3 or 4. And I really like it because community is huge, and everyone, everyone has different experience, different background, but somehow we create a lot of events that are interesting for many developers, right? And this experience for me is different from experience with I would say specialty oriented communities. Let's say iOS developers, that they speak about iOS development mostly, right? Android developers or Python developers, you know what I mean. Women Who Code is a community where specialty is not the main attribute, right? And I met a lot of incredible women and incredible engineers who work in areas I have no knowledge at all, and I learned every time I learned something new. So in Women Who Code Kyiv, I know we have really huge community. It's more like 2,000 people, and of course the organization team is smaller. It's more like 20 people who organize all the things. I organize or co-organize security events. I like to speak about security. I do some workshops that I typically do I did as a paid workshops on some conferences for Women Who Code community. I do them for free, and of course they're quite limited in amount of seats, but still it's a nice way to share knowledge and share tips and tricks in nicer environment, I will put it this way.
And have you ever been perceived or treated differently because you're a woman in cybersecurity? And if so, how do you see this changing in the future?
Well, I would say that, bias exists. And I think these gender-based biases, they will be with us for some time, even when we try to do our best to kind of highlight them and maybe eliminate or at least decrease amount, but still bias exists. And I would say that it's really good to be able to see those biases, to understand that what is happening right now, it's not okay. That if someone is saying you that, oh nice, you're a woman, you're so beautiful and you're an engineer, it might sound like a compliment, but at the same time you can react on this compliment saying, well, I believe that you're saying really nice things for me, but I would feel more confident if you say that, talk with me about programming or about this conference more than about how attractive I am, this kind of thing. So, because for me, it took a lot of time trying to find this, that some behavior, it just sexist, even if it doesn't feel like a big deal. And I can say that, hey, I don't feel good about that. Can we just do it? Don't say this joke. I feel that you wanna say the joke, but it's not funny. It's actually sexist, and let's just keep moving. And it helps a lot because sometimes people just do these things and they don't understand what they're doing. It's just part of the culture, and just being able to highlight this and say, that's not really good, actually helps. So I would say that bias exists. It's still here. It gets better every year from my personal experience. But being able to highlight and just say honestly that that is okay and this is not okay helps a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree. Sometimes it's difficult to see how harmful these comments are, because when you first hear them, they sound innocent. And sometimes it comes later that you realize that this is bad and that these contribute towards maintaining these sexist biases. So yeah, I agree that you have to speak up. So just one last question. How would you describe your job to your parents?
Oh, that's a complicated one. I don't even know what my parents think I do. I mean, they obviously know that they know that I do something with programming and with computers and with security, but I don't know. They might think that I'm hacking banks, because many movies shows us that people in security they are in hoodies and they are hackers that can hack mainframe in 10 seconds. Yeah. So how I would explain my job to my parents, I would say that modern world runs on software, and everywhere they go, every bank, every application is a piece of software, and this software are created by human, right? And humans, they do a lot of mistakes, even clever humans as software developers. And my job is to prevent or fix some of these mistakes that are related to sensitive data, and to make sure that huge data leaks don't happen, or at least happen rarely. So yeah, I would say something like that, yeah.
Oh, thanks. That's a great explanation. Unfortunately, we're reaching the time limit. I think that's all the time we had for today. Thank you so much again, Anastasiia, for coming to the podcast, and thanks, Kevin, for joining. You can follow Anastasiia on Twitter at @vixentau and check out the other links in the show notes where you can follow her work. Thanks everyone for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode. Bye!